Hello, everyone. This is Better Teaching, Only Stuff That Works, a podcast for teachers, instructional coaches, administrators, and anyone else who supports teachers in the classroom. This show is a proud member of the BE Podcast Network, shows that help you go beyond education. Find all our shows at bepodcastnetwork.com. I'm Gene Tavernetti, the host for this podcast, and my goal for this episode, like all episodes, is that you laugh at least once and that you leave with an actionable idea for better teaching. A quick reminder, we'll only be sharing stuff that works, no cliches, no buzzwords. My guest today is Amy Pento. Currently, she's an instructional consultant, a former instructional specialist, and former longtime Spanish teacher from Liverpool, New York. Amy taught Spanish for 31 years at Liverpool High School, levels 1 through 5 AP. During that time, she was chosen the CNY Leadership for the Leadership Development Program, served as the World Language Department Chair, and mentored close to 100 students through the Seal of Biliteracy process. She created and facilitated teacher book clubs like Why Don't Students Like School and The Writing Revolution. For the past 3 years, she was an instructional specialist for the Liverpool Central Schools. And in addition to working one-on-one with teachers, she aimed to bring the science of learning to staff and students. She provided professional development on evidence-informed topics, such as how to teach writing, how learning happens, classroom management, academic routines, robust vocabulary instruction, Rosenshine's principles of instruction, and effective practice and study. She's presented on forgetting, learning, and study strategies to students. She's curated research and best practices for staff via Pedagogy Central, doing fewer things better on her Google Classroom. Amy, welcome to Better Teaching. Only
Hi,
Stuff That Works.
thanks for having me.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this for quite a while.
Nice to meet you in
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, I never know what to say this is,
I know,
this
it's
kind of meeting. But one of the things that, this show is about instructional coaching. And when we started talking and communicating about this, you said you don't want to be referred to as a coach.
right.
And that instead you asked your district to refer you as an instructional specialist. Why is
Yes.
that?
Okay. Well, the main reason is I was at the high school. The high school had no instructional coaches whatsoever. So I knew the minute if they introduced me as an instructional coach, my colleagues who I had worked with for decades would be like, get out of town. We don't need you. What is this? And I think it would put people's noses out of joint. So that was reason number one. Reason number two, the coaches that we have K-8 are tied to a certain curricula. If that makes, like, we use this math program. These are our math coaches to help the K-8 teachers use that program better. Same thing with our ELA instruction. That I wasn't at the high school. I didn't have any interest in any program. I wanted to bring research and what I've learned from these people that I read and followed and studied. I wanted to bring that to the staff, which is not a program at all. And I want people to use the knowledge that I share so that when it's time to pick programs, they can make better choices and look for stronger things than others. So because I'm at the high school and I wanted to help anybody, it could not be content based or program based. And I would say those are the two reasons.
They did it fool them?
I did. Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I would say that, that the only time I did things that you probably would consider coaching was either by administrative request with a teacher who's struggling, or by a teacher request who came to me on their own. There is no, when I see more formal coaches, there's systems and there's practices, there's none of that. It was whack-a-mole. It would just be if something popped up, I was an additional resource for administration or for teachers.
Okay, so I have to ask you this to follow up. You said not what I might think of as coaching. Could you explain what you think I might think of as coaching?
Yeah. I think this is what I think you think.
Okay.
Is that it is a system within a district of providing a formalized support system for most, some, that I don't know, teachers, and that there's cycles. I hear people who I consider real instructional coach talk a lot about the coaching cycles, and I picture it systemic, that it is a
Okay.
built-in offering, a given, so to speak, for a district. That's what I picture.
Well, what's interesting about that description and about you saying you weren't doing that, when I first became interested in you and what you had to say about the work that you had done, it was because it matched so much with what I thought about
Really?
what coaching was. Because one of the things that I think, one of the big reasons I think teachers aren't interested in doing the coaching is because there are so many times we can have a teacher can be a really good teacher. And it might just be this tiny little thing that, it's just a comment, that they hadn't thought about,
Mhm.
that, maybe one of Rosenshine's principles, which
Right.
I'm going to quiz you on later,
Oh,
but
gosh.
but it could just be a simple thing. It doesn't have to be a big formalized thing. I think we made it way too big, so people don't want to get involved in that. And so they end up, we don't have an opportunity to work with them. But
Yeah, mine is more, I wanted to kind of throw stuff out so they know that there's quality research out there and stuff that seems to be rising to the top. And I always cited my sources, and I tried to be like, it wasn't just Amy thinks this is a cute thing.
yeah.
That would make my skin crawl. Like, that'd be bad. And it was more like, this is interesting, and here's why. And then with the coaching, if a teacher was interested, it'd be like, hey, you sent this thing out, how would I do that with this? That was very fun for me. That was really, it was a fun challenge to be like, oh, I don't know, let's figure it out.
So you weren't a content area coach, you were an instructional specialist working with folks. Did the people who came to you, were they outside of your content area? I don't know how many Spanish you
I
might have
don't,
in a department.
we have quite a few. We have a pretty
Okay.
large, I would say there's, I don't know, 8, 10, 12, I think I've only had one language teacher come to me on one day. That was it. It could be that I was too close.
Uh-huh.
It could be that, I don't know. I just think is it like kissing your sister? Like, is it just like it's two, we were together. There was also massive turnover due to retirements in my department. So the new people didn't know me very well. Some came to my PD, but the one-on-one coaching, I had one day, one teacher came and talked to me, and it never turned into anything more. So
You mentioned that maybe you were too close. I think one of the drums that I'm beating lately, and I'm going to for a while, is the idea of relationships. And what you described was a paradox of being close and not wanting to work. And not wanting to work with you. You had close personal relationships.
mhm.
What I'm pushing now, the idea of coaches have professional relationships with the teachers that are, you could also have a personal, but it's a more of a professional relationship, more akin to how you feel about your doctor.
Yeah.
You don't go to your doctor and after 1 minute they might say, "Oh, how was your vacation?" Then it's all
Right.
business. So what are you here for? What are you here for? So it's interesting that uh, you might be too close working on becoming an instructional specialist on the staff where you were a teacher.
Yeah.
Because that's always one of the things that I ask people. So I'll ask you right now, was that weird? We already talked about your department, but
Mhm.
how was it working on your staff with all these folks that knew you already?
It was, I would say it was weird in parts, and I would guess I'd call it in the middle of the weirdness spectrum, so to speak. You know, I, again, I'd never been in any other building. I knew nothing different. So I'm sure when people saw me in that role, there was probably a third that was like, I would never take 1 ounce of anything from her. She's awful. There's probably a third that are open and like, oh, she's collegial. Well, this will be a nice thing. And then there might be a third who either outwardly supported me, or I think I learned by the end, there were a lot of lurkers, if I'm going to use that word, people who
Okay.
might have read and paid attention, but never quite reached out and joined me, so to
Uh-huh.
speak. That happens on Twitter a lot, that there's
Yeah.
the people who participate and then the people who watch the conversations. Often the lurkers were TAs who would sometimes come to tell me that they were seeing improvements in some of the instruction. I don't even want to say improvement. They were seeing some
Yeah.
of the strategies being taken up by staff who had never once reached out to me one-on-one. So that was kind of cool to go like, okay, all right, it's kind of flooding the atmosphere with some of this information and some of it is sticking.
How'd you flood the zone with information?
So I used as my inspiration, basically I used the word instructional specialist to do a research. I can't think of what they called it. I'm forgetting. And it was, and I sat there and I got the gig and then I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do every day? Like I've never not been in a classroom. So I ended up basically rereading a ton of the things that I'd been reading already. I'd take the books out again and I'd start to look at it with a new set of eyes, so to speak. And I'd start to look for patterns. And then I would look at things to prioritize, like what again were the most common, the most important things. And then, the principal asked to meet with me over the summer and God bless him. It could have been awful. Like he didn't know what I knew. He could have clipped my wings and he didn't. And it was, I think, luck and faith kind of thrown in together, so to speak. But I did say, I said, can I have a meeting? Can I have a faculty meeting? And he gave me the September, faculty meeting. And it was an opportunity to try to reintroduce myself in this new way. And I did an example thing. And it was a way to tell them like how to reach me, how to work with me, things I could do. And then I started sending like a research summary out to the staff and in one email a day. And I tried to basically summarize it, link to it, and possibly other supporting things. And then after about a couple of weeks, people started to say, I'm saving all your emails, but it's getting overwhelming. Like, can we have it be at a place? And they said, would you set up a Google Classroom? And I was like, oh, duh. Like, I was so used to that being for students. I hadn't
Right.
occurred to
Yeah.
me. So I did, and I called it Pedagogy Central. And I started to, anything I posted to the staff, I also then would put there as a place they could go to. I tried lots of things early on. I did what I called the itty bitty book club, where I got the first chapter of a book I had read and asked the author if I could share that with the staff for free. Do I know if it led to anything? I don't know. I tried to get a robust vocabulary instruction thing going with tier 2 words. A few teachers, mostly not the core area, not the tier 1 instructors were interested. It was hard to have this much interest and passion and zero power at all. I would meet with the administration every 6 to 8 weeks to basically, I would summarize what I'd been doing. So, because I knew they wouldn't have any idea. So I'd like summarize who I'd met with, what I was doing, things I was sharing. And then I would use it as an opportunity. I would say like, here's something I think you should consider. This might be a good idea. And I'd highlight the articles and make notes on it because I know they're really busy. And I was like, I know you don't have time. This is not meant to be insulting. Like I go, it's
Yeah.
not that I don't think you can read it. It's just that I think this would be really good for us. And I want to save you time. And then I offered like what I call like mini courses after school that some people came to, and it grew from there.
So were those optional, or was that part of the
Those were optional.
established? Okay.
Optional. And then the next year, I would say the next summer, I started to get tapped by administration for like new teacher orientation. I got pulled
Okay.
into that more formally, and it makes sense. But, to be fair, we just don't have stuff like what I was trying to do. And what I was trying to do is mimic what I think I see going on in the UK. And so I was kind of, what is it, flying the plane and building it at the same
Yeah. Yeah.
time, except that I knew what I wanted to share. I just had zero structure or systems. And that was more, I was confident in what I wanted to share. It was just, I didn't know how to best do it.
So you mentioned that your principal then this is just a neutral statement,
Mhm.
really didn't know what to have you do. He didn't know what you're going to do. So how did was there an instructional specialist before you?
No, it was with the COVID funds. The
Okay.
district had this extra stuff. So they called it a coach. I can't remember I don't know. I smiled and I just said, I will never refer to myself as a coach ever.
Yeah.
It would say like on my door, it said coach, and then I'd cover it with something. And by the end, when my job, every year, because it was COVID funds, it had to be
Yeah.
renewed every year. Eventually I saw it said instructional specialist on it. And I thought, use
Uh,
the word enough. It becomes finally the thing
yeah.
people would say,
I'm
so
just laughing because how many positions have been created over the years with special funds, and they never seem to be used for the intended purposes. And so, I mean, God bless you for being, to have the foresight, the wisdom to be able to say, this is, I think, what the staff
this
would
was my
need.
shot. Like I had to shoot my
Yeah.
shot. Yes.
Yeah. Because I think one of the reasons that instructional coaches or instructional specialists haven't been able to be as effective as they could be is because even though we've had coaches for, well, when I started in 2006 as an instructional coach, it wasn't called an instructional coach. We just supported teachers. We did
Yes.
training and then we supported teachers in what we trained them to do. And so even though that's nearly 20 years, there really haven't been a generation of coaches becoming administrators. Well, let me back up. Successful coaches becoming administrators, because so many times as a stepping stone, to becoming
Yes.
administration.
Correct.
But you did it for 3 years. You probably know something now. But that first year, you were building the plane.
Yes.
And so that's why that's my theory, that we just don't have enough institutional knowledge moving up the chain to administration and then even past site administration into district administration, because they don't know about it and they don't know what's possible.
That's it. I think that's where I'm with you. What I would say is that we never, ever talk about instruction. You throw around the term, I'm in charge of, I'm the administrator in charge of curriculum and instruction. Instruction is an afterthought. Nobody has it on their front burner. I remember having completely separate conversations with very different administrators during my first year, impromptu. And things that were said were things like, well, the teaching here, it's really solid. And I just said, like, it's not, it's not, in the sense of like, there's so much that nobody knew what retrieval was. Nobody knew about spacing. No one knew about interleaving, or dual coding. No one knew Rosenshine, nothing, ever, nothing. It was anything with instruction was either tech or like a cute thing. It was always the end. There wasn't a lot of why to do this. It was like, cool, I saw this thing and it seems cool or good. I don't mean to be flippant when I say cool.
Oh, no,
And it
no,
looked,
yeah,
and it
yeah,
worked. So let's do it. But that's where you can have the best of intentions, but if you don't understand the underlying reason, you might make tweaks that undo the reason you do. Here's my first year. It is the fall, late fall, early winter. And I did a thing for the staff on retrieval practice. It was maybe the October or November faculty meeting. And I had a teacher walk by my little office and goes, Amy, I tried that retrieval. I did retrieval with my class. And I was like, so I was like I was like so excited, I was like, you're kidding me. She goes, yeah, but they couldn't do it. So without their notes and stuff. So we just used their notes. Thanks. And I said, just
yeah,
like, well, that's not retrieval. But what I would have said is, sure, the first couple times it might be really hard. So maybe the first time you try it, you say, they did a grid thing, that I got from Kate Jones, So I was like, maybe you say, first time around, let's try to get 3 of these things on this grid. And then you work on it. And then you could say, next time, let's try to get 5 things on the grid. Like I would have continued the conversation, but it was so Like the high and low of that 3-minute conversation of like, oh, they tried it and they thought they did retrieval, but they clearly do not understand that retrieval means you're pulling it out of your head. You're not pulling it up off of something else.
Yeah, it is, that high and the low. And just the fact that whatever you did, Amy, to inspire them to try it should inspire them to invite you back. So let's go see that, I couldn't tell you everything I knew about it, Miss Smith, but so let's go
Right.
back and take a look.
But
Because
the other option
yeah,
is it didn't work, Amy, and what you're selling is not good. And so
yeah,
that, there's and that's the thing is it's like people need, just because teachers are like anyone's a learner. It doesn't matter if you're 15 or you're 45. They need to see it over and over again and to get the nuance and the
yeah,
depth. And like I would learn when I would go back and reread books that I would have said I read. I couldn't believe how rewarding it was to go back and read, why don't students like school again, with the lens of like, for somebody else, I'd be like, oh, I forgot about this chapter. Or I forgot this was such a
yeah.
good thing. And why wouldn't that be true for the adults? So having more systemic ways would be better. And it felt like I was throwing all sorts of things out, hoping some would stick.
Yeah.
It'd be not, in a perfect world, it would have been a bit more systemic, but
Well, I think, going back to one of my big metaphors in working with teachers is teacher may want to, let's use a metaphor of getting in shape, losing weight, whatever.
right.
And I've got this great program. We could talk about macronutrients and we could talk about, all of these things. First step, I just want to get them to the gym. That's all.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to get them to the gym.
right.
And that's what you described to me. I did retrieval practice.
Yeah.
And I didn't lose any weight at all. And so,
Or I'm too sore the next
yeah.
day and now I don't want to do it again. Or right, I still can't fit in my bathing suit, after one day. So
And so one of the things I learned that I started saying to teachers is that, you know what, you're exactly where you should be because that's what everybody does.
yes,
And so it's knowing what the end is and
yes,
knowing if we stay with it, you could do with it. And I'd love to help you because now that you've done that, I could take you to the next level.
yes.
So that's great. Let's see, you were talking about your administration. So you worked with the administration,
Yeah, quite a bit.
and so were as instructional specialist because you worked with the administration a lot, did teachers see you as administration?
I'm sure a third saw me as betraying. I'm sure a
Yeah.
third didn't think twice about it. I worked with them, but in the sense of this was basically post COVID. It
Yeah.
was the last year I taught was the year we went back hybrid masked, and
Yeah.
then I left. So, what I was doing was I was trying to be like a sounding board for them and with what
For
they were trying to work.
admin or teachers?
Sorry, admin. I would try to,
Okay.
like,
Okay.
I would say the biggest issue my first year as the instructional specialist, all the students came back to school then. And we were all masked for the first several months of the school year. And at some point, the mask mandate started to go away. The behavior was horrific. I sent my own children through my high school and never thought twice about it. I was never scared a day. That year I was scared in the halls, and I thought if this is the way it had been, I don't think I would have let my children come here. My heart was broken. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I couldn't believe it. So, and we had a big admin turnover, and so they weren't asking me to work with them. I was barging into a little bit, and I would just say, "Hey, I haven't seen you in about 6 weeks. Can we talk?" And I would say things like, what I tried to do is I wanted to help them pick the biggest bang for their buck with where they should put their attention and not try to, throwing everything out there and exhausting them. So, I'll never forget the day I asked for a meeting with the two head principals, and I just said, we need a phone policy. It's never going to get better until we have a phone policy. And I think I have some ideas on how to do that. And God bless them. They said yes. And then they went to the district admins, and at first they were like, no, you're nuts. You're never gonna. And they did it. And it was like the principal the next year, there was a little bit of turnover, and he started to survey the staff. And in the fall, they asked the staff, what's going well, what's not, and any comments you want to make. What's not is the phones was number one in behavior and the halls. By the end of the year, I cry whenever, like, and I remember the principal called me and he goes, Amy, I have the results of the spring, the late May or early June. I cried like a baby. And it was like, what? I'm going to cry right now. It's 2 years later. And he goes, the number one complaint were the phones. And he goes, here's the spring one. What's going well? And it was the phones. And they go, and what's not working? And the number one response was nothing. And
Wow.
nothing not working, like, meaning basically things are so much better.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
couldn't believe it. And there's been, like, having been there, it's weird to be then the like most senior person on the staff, because you're looking around for people who remember. And I finally found somebody else who'd been there like 28 years. And I go, did you ever think this staff would ever say nothing is wrong? Even if nothing was wrong, like you should use that, right, as an opportunity.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it, and so it started with the phone thing. And then, so what I was able to do is I was able to use my institutional memory, which most of the admin did not have from that building, my knowledge about learning, and like, and I would sit and I would notice things like the halls, why the halls were, miserable. So I came up with a suggestion about bathroom passes. And it sounds crazy, but I just said, here's why the system will never work. When you make teachers do something that is only a tiny bit naughty, but it's going to take a lot of teacher time to deal with, that's not a good return on their investment. They have too much other stuff to do. I said, so we've got to make it easy for teachers to do what you want them to do, because those small naughty things add up and can ruin a building. It can create this mojo of the building not working. So I was able to talk about, instruction in the sense of like behavior as well. Like, we can't let kids be wandering the building, the term internal truancy. And they listened, and then the part that I wasn't good at was, how do I create a whole system in a school, like top down? And that's what they are good at. So like,
Yeah.
I was able to say, like, this is going to pay off big time. And don't worry about doing this other thing till the building has to be under control first. And then they created this system. And I just remember it, like, over the summer, I would get pictures of things they'd ordered, and they'd come into the office, and they'd go, it's here, and it would be this lanyard system, or it would be the phone caddies, or it would be these signs. I said, there's no signage in the building at all. It's really rude, and so principals ordered these beautiful signs. And like, they took the suggestions, not saying they took every suggestion, but then they made it happen, and that's the stuff that I didn't have experience with. Like, how do you order stuff? I don't know. What's the budget? I don't know. That's the stuff that would have paralyzed me. So I think it was like, I don't know if you're old enough to know what Wonder Twin Powers activate means, but there were these superheroes where you had like one group and another, and when they were together, like, the magic could happen. So I felt like I could bring them some ideas that I felt really solid about, and then they ran with it.
Amy, I just have to interrupt you. First of all, how sweet of you to question how old I am to remember things. But I wanted to bring a couple things together that you talked about with regard to being, working with the administration. And I think two things very important for instructional coaches, instructional specialists, whatever they are, think about is that their position with the administration is not based on their title. It's based on who they are. They respect you. You may have been an instructional specialist, but when you went in to talk to them, you were coming in with teacher concerns. You were coming in with things that would make the school better.
Yeah.
And tied to that is this idea of anything that you tell an instructional specialist or an instructional coach that a teacher says is confidential. Well, look what would have happened if you would have went by that rule. All these things that you would have told the administration that made the school better wouldn't have happened. So,
Right.
so I was talking to friend of mine, Linda Ryan, and she's using the term transparency. Say, when a teacher tells me I'm going to the administration to share this, because
Yes.
I don't have the authority. I don't have the authority to do this, but I got some juice and we could try to get it done. So I think the way you described your working with the administration, I think was very important for whatever you call yourself
Right. It
that
was
in that.
never, what was cool is it was never top down. They never told me told me what to send out, ever. And that's where I'm like, God bless them. Because I could have been
Yeah.
sending out crazy stuff. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't really think that's a great system. Like, I think it
No, it's
was
not. It's not a great
because
system.
you had someone with a lot of experience teaching, you had someone who was into learning about how learning happens. You also had somebody at the end of her career that was not looking to use this as a stepping stone. So I
Yeah.
really wanted to give back to the district. Like I wanted to make it better, like because I knew I had to leave soon. And it was
Yeah.
this like, no, it can't stay this mess. This can't be how people live there. This can't be. This is so bad. So, and we had a brand new team of admins who everybody was loving. And it was like, this is the time to strike. But you can't, like, that's a big risk.
I want to make a point. I want to put an exclamation point on a couple things you said. You talked quite a bit right now describing how the things that you just saw that made things better, that made the staff think, no, we're right on. We're doing a good job. And that was never your emphasis. You saw that, the teacher saw it, but what you were really into, what you really wanted for the teachers was the instructional component, getting better with instruction. And I just want to be sure that the listeners are on track.
Yes.
Yes, you do these other things,
Yes.
but the most important thing is the instructional piece,
Right.
which you spent most of your time doing. And again, to
Very much
paraphrase,
so.
you went to the administration with it, and now it's your job. Go do it.
Yes.
That's your job. That's not my job.
Because part of what it was is what I wanted to share is the stuff you can focus on when you're not just trying to survive. And that year was such a dark year
Yeah.
that it didn't matter because it was awful. And so I was just like, I'll be sending this out and stuff, but nothing's gonna, unless a teacher happens to have a perfect classroom where things are a little bit better, it's too chaotic right now. It's just awful it was just like, you got to do that first. Then my stuff can start to stick better,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well.
All right. Well, you did had a longer run than many instructional specialists,
Hmm.
coaches. You have a proud moment other than the one you shared about the TA coming and telling you that
Oh,
teacher was a student.
those were nice moments. I would say, seeing the teacher surveys that I knew I was part of that. I told the principal, I said, do not tell anybody, that I made some suggestions, because what I didn't want is I didn't want them to get stained with if there's people on staff who either didn't like me or was worried about, oh, is she an admin in disguise? I was like, I just want to show you this would work better than this. So seeing those surveys were pretty cool. It was nice little individual notes from teachers, when I'd
Yeah.
get like, I tried it, and then they'd send about one teacher, for example, tried stuff this summer in a summer school, and he sent me the student comments were done
Uh-huh.
digitally. And like, I got choked up. It was because the students were able to cite specific things that he and I had worked on. I would say those were the feel good moments. And I would say my proudest moments are probably, I got my last year in admin pulled me to work on K2 writing, and I created over 2,000 pages of basically a writing companion for the Amplify CKLA, ELA knowledge building, where I took the writing revolution strategies and applied it to that content. And it was a bear. I was pretty miserable doing it, I don't know if that makes sense, but my husband just said, every night you're on the couch, and I had one of those booklets next to me, and I was just constantly,
Yeah.
creating material. So getting that done, it's an important work. and I'm proud of that. And then this one I'm proud of, but I'm a little jealous. Like, the district has this guiding coalition, and a subcommittee was on high leverage practices. And they put me on that subcommittee, and we decided to prioritize for this coming school year retrieval, basically a spaced retrieval, combining. So it sounds like it's only one thing, but it's really two things at
Yeah.
once. And, my contract, the job ended with the federal funds on June 30th. And then this summer, I went in for 3 days to work with the committee members who will go on. And it was to hand over all that, was basically to open my brain and get them as up to speed as much as possible. And, I heard from a colleague saying, oh, we had our first meeting of the school year, and we're doing this and this. And I just am like, like it. So it feels like I maybe gave a push, that initial push, but I have to say I feel a little like sad that I'm not going to be there, to see the
Yeah.
next steps.
Yeah. Well,
It's part of, it's part of the cycle of life and part of the professional life, but I just feel like a lot of things were put into motion, and then, the clock chimed. I'm Cinderella, you know what I mean? Like the clock
yeah.
chimed midnight, and I'm back in my rags and sitting at home. And
I guess so. So tell us about what you offer your consultancy. What is it that you're offering schools now?
so basically I sat down and was like, what do I know a lot about? So what I'm offering is, a lot of people only know me as she's the writing lady, the writing revolution lady. But I always start my PD on writing. And I always sit there and I go, I know you're here for writing, but I need you to bear with me. And sometimes it's for 15 minutes or for 4, depending how long the thing is, how much time I have in total. I go, but I need you to bear with me because you're going to think I've missed the mark. We're going to start a little bit about how learning happens. And we're going to do that because I think by the end, what I would be sad at the end of this is if you went home and said, yeah, I went to this thing and I learned she gave me a few cute things, or she gave me a couple of neat things to do. I want the people who attend the writing to understand why I think the writing revolution is such an incredible source. And it's because of explicit writing instruction and what it does for learning, and how it can become you can use it with retrieval, you can use it with spacing, how you can use writing to force yourself to think hard about what you are trying to learn. And I want them to know that thinking hard is a requirement in the working memory, and not overloading. And by using a few strategies of the writing revolution, the kids can familiarize themselves with a because but so format. And so they get a chance to think hard without overloading their limited working memory. And I want them to see the role of attention and all of it in the process. And again, I think at the end there's a bigger payoff. And so far, no one's like thrown me out and like gone after me with pitchforks for doing that. And often it is the learning part that sticks with people longer. That there's like, my very first thing I tend to do is show Ebbinghouse's forgetting curve. And then to introduce what spaced practice is. And then I go, well, let's talk a little bit more of how learning happens. And then I do that, the model of the input, and then the working memory and the long-term memory. And I basically preface it as, my teacher ed, like, I got none of this. None of this. I have an undergraduate degree, I have a master's degree, and I have my administrative degree. 0 minutes were spent on how students learn. And I feel a little bit of rage about it. That's my anger. I started my career being mad at the kids because I was like, what's wrong with the kids? And then I realized, and then I said, oh, it must be their parents. And then I was like, then I was mad at my colleagues, and I was like, well, clearly and like every 5 or 7, 10 years I'd come up with, then I was mad at the admins. It's easy to be mad at the admins,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And now where I am, I don't know if I'll end up somewhere else, but right now I'm mad at the schools of education and teacher preparation. It is unconscionable. You'll see me, I often will tweet like educational malpractice. I am wanting to bring to the attention, and I want to use a little bit of shame. I want there to be like, you should be embarrassed that like every 6 months I pull up the the 4 local universities to look at their courses for teachers. And I get enraged every time.
Oh, yeah. Well, Amy, you and I have a lot in common with respect to our beliefs and where we think we could go. And it's always exciting when you do some professional development, you work with somebody and they ask the question, why didn't we learn this?
Yeah.
You
There
should
was
go
a
to the
teacher who
university.
raised her hand and she goes, how many times when you present about forgetting, do people and do the teachers have seen that before? And I go, if they have, they've never said it, and you could just, and I think it's what I hear from elementary teachers about the science of reading is that there's this like mix of shame and anger and frustration of like, oh my God, what was I asking them to do? I was doing what they told me to do. I was telling teachers to have them guess and cover the word. The idea that we taught kids how to read by covering a word is crazy. And so
Yeah.
what I want as teachers, what I hope I did is I used to see it as there was an hourglass of my career, and that I was like, if I can get enough info in enough of my colleagues' heads that when I'm gone, it'll be easier for them to be like, that's not a good initiative, or that's not a good series, or we should not be doing it, that they then can pick it up and carry it on and keep driving the district in the right direction.
Well, listeners, if you want to learn more about Amy and have her come to your district, I will get her contact information and be sure to put it in the show notes here. Amy, it has been an absolute joy, just like I knew it would be.
Great to talk to you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
If you are enjoying these podcasts, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. And you can find me on Twitter X at gtavernetti and on my website, tesscg.com. That's TESSCG.com, where you'll get information about how to order my books, Teach Fast, Focused Adaptable Structured Teaching, and Maximizing the Impact of Coaching Cycles. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you soon.